author of Vienna Triangle, literary laureate for the San Francisco Public Library, and best-selling author of 10 books, Brenda Webster's most recent acclaimed novel represents a triumph, combining what the San Francisco Chronicle called her impressive knowledge of Freudian theory with the novelist's intuitive understanding of character and point of view. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Or project.
I will project. I will try to project. Yeah, I just want to, can you hear me now?
Do you want me to hold the microphone for you?
No, I can try to hold it. Is that better? I think it's off.
No, it's on. You have to hold it close to your mouth.
Hello?
Yeah.
Do you hear it now? I can't hear it.
It's okay when you project it too, but just...
No, but do you hear it when I do this?
Better.
Yeah.
Better.
All right. My book, Vienna Triangle, and I just have to show off the beautiful cover, which is Klimt's The Kiss. Suggests the erotic material. Is about the hotbed of loves and rivalries in Freud's inner circle. What?
We're talking about turning the volume up.
Okay. Yeah, because I can't hear any.
All right, here, just one moment. We're going to have a... Don't start.
Come through the chair. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance between it being loud enough or it's walking and screaming.
Oh, no, that would be bad.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. So I'm going to come behind you. Okay, try now.
Is this better? Now I at least hear the sort of reverberation. Can you hear it now? Can you hear it, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay. So this book is about the hotbed of loves and rivalries in Freud's inner circle, and Freud's role in the tragic death of his disciple, Victor Tausk. Like Michelle's novel, it's essentially the story of a cover-up, a story denied and done away with. And actually, when I was telling this to Michelle that I was citing her, she reminded me that there are two cover-ups. One is the cover-up in Freud's inner circle, and the other is the cover-up in Kate's family, where her mother refuses to tell her about her family history. And eventually, as the novel goes on, these two come together. So Kate gradually, like Michelle's novel, I said it's essentially the story of a cover-up, and the heroine Kate gradually uncovers it with unexpected results for her own life. The official story about Tausk was that he had succumbed to the stress of his service in World War I. He was a psychologist, and he was helping, cure traumatized shell shock victims, and he was really an anti-war activist way before this was the thing to do. He stopped the army, his superiors, from shooting various people, peasants who went back to their land, because he explained to the officers that the peasants, they went back to their land to harvest or sow, that the peasants had no idea of the state, and therefore when it was time to harvest or sow, they thought their land was calling them and they went back. He also saved a young nobleman who refused to kill prisoners in cold blood, to execute them, and he convinced the officers that this man had been brought up with such a humanistic tradition that to kill people in cold blood. We really need people like this around today. But anyway, the official story was that he succumbed to the stress of doing this counseling, came back and killed himself. The real story was quite different and involved a triangle made up of Freud, Tausk, and Lou Andreas Salome, the beautiful and brilliant philosopher-writer who came to learn about psychoanalysis from Freud in 1913. And I'm going to read a short scene which I hope will give the flavor of the relationships. At the time of the scene, Freud was making every effort to draw Lou Salome away from Tausk by a mini-analysis. He would meet her, late in the evening in his studio, and he would kind of elicit things from her, getting her to tell him her most intimate stories. And therapy often involves creating a self-story, a healing narrative, but in fact, Freud sometimes used the therapy process and the stories he elicited from people, particularly his disciples, to seduce and powerfully bind them to him through what came to be known as the transference. And now I'm going to read the scene, if I can do this one-handed. In this scene, Tausk describes in a diary which my heroine discovers from 1913 what happened when Lou Salome returns to him after an intense evening conversation with Freud. And this is his diary. I grew restless as the evening wore on, and Lou still did not return. When she finally came around 1 in the morning, my heart sank to see that Freud, too, had given her roses, a huge bunch in a deep, deep crimson. "You are positively radiant," I said. "Your talk must have been stimulating." "Are you being sarcastic?" she asked. "Of course not," I replied, not meeting her eyes. "Good," she said, caressing my cheek with her hand. I felt for a moment as though I were a child being rewarded for good behavior. To recapture my manhood, I tried to take her to bed, but she was not ready. She had to unwind first. She rearranged the flowers, took some tea that I had prepared for her, and between sips, culled bits from her conversation with Freud and offered them to me. She told Freud her childhood idea that a woman's internal organs are like the inside of a mountain filled with precious stones. "There are so many descriptive terms for one's prick," I said, holding down my jealousy that she had revealed such intimate fantasy. "There certainly ought to be something similar for womb, and that sounds like a splendid one. Do you know how you arrived at it?" "Oh, I'd seen the Jungfrau on a trip to Switzerland once when I went down into a mine with my father," she said, and I could tell from the rapidity with which she answered that Freud had already asked her this. "My favorite fairy tale was about a princess," she went on, "from whose mouth jewels gushed at every word." Here she smiled up at me as though to say, "See, everything I offered him, I am sharing with you." But though I know she was trying to make me feel better, I was tormented by the fact that I had no way of knowing what she was really hiding. Lou's relationship to Tausk came to an end shortly before he went off to war, and he records their parting in his diary. "Lou saw me off at the Munich station. There was a strong breeze, and she was wearing a little hat with a white veil that blurred her features as I strained to make them out. For a moment, I was tempted to jump off and run back to her, but it would have done no good." In 1918, Tausk committed suicide. Freud wrote a flattering and lengthy obituary of Tausk, saying he was a sacrifice the psychoanalytic movement had given to the war, that he was noble and brilliant and had done innovative and important work. This obituary was very long. It went on for 3 pages and just used superlative after superlative. This was a view of the facts for public consumption. It covered up a very different reality. Now I'm going to read the letter he wrote in private to Lou Salome, which reveals his real feelings and tells another story. And this is a real letter. When it was first printed, crucial lines were suppressed, probably by his daughter, Anna. And here's the letter. Vienna, October 5th, 1918. Poor Tausk, who you distinguished a while with your friendship, put an end to his life on July 3rd. He came back from the horrors of war exhausted, set out under the most unfavorable circumstances to reconstruct the existence he had lost through his military duty, made an attempt to take a new woman into his life, was due to marry, but fate decided otherwise. His farewell letter to me is affectionate, attests to his lucidity, blames no one but his own inadequacy and bungled life, thus throws no light on the final deed. In the letter to me, he avers his steadfast fidelity to psychoanalysis, thanks me, etc. But how it looked behind that is not to be guessed. So he fought out his day of life with the father ghost. I confess I do not really miss him. This is a man he'd worked with for 10 years. I had long taken him to be useless, indeed, a threat to the future. I had a glance to cast a few glances into the substructure on which his proud sublimations rest, and would long since have dropped him, had you not so boosted him in my esteem. Thank you.